Welcome to USFL Today, still the off-season edition. I'm your host, Angelo, welcoming you to a very special episode. It's my first crossover edition, and I welcome in community experts, if you will, Zach and the ref to the show. Gentlemen, welcome. It's good to connect with you again. How are you?
Oh, I'm feeling good, and I'm happy to be here, man. USFL Today, a whole new show. I like to kind of bounce around, play the circuit. So add another, you know what they say, another notch in the bedpost, if you will.
Well, it's not like this is the first time we've interacted on a show together, no matter what brand heading may have been. So this isn't exactly our first foray into
100%.
Working
That's
together.
Right. I was going to say, I still remember summer stock and all that getting to have a bit of a sit there. So
that was quite a day, man. And you guys,
Yeah.
now you had that great summer stock where it seemed like it was like the Merv Griffin show. Every 2 minutes was another guest, and you just kept bringing them in, and it was fantastic because we got to like talk with everybody else that was part of the community on your show, and you get to put like faces to those names. So that was great. Like, what goes into, you have all that equipment, right? And you guys were streaming, so we were live and people could watch us that day. But what goes into all that effort? It's like, do you have roadies that help you set up all that stuff, or is it just you two guys? And then who does all the booking? Or do you have a booker, or is there just you two guys?
Roadies, man.
I could only wish. I could only imagine. But no,
I'll tell you had a soundboard, you had multiple microphones, you had cameras. This was a full-fledged production.
Sure. I'll say it's definitely a community effort. When we look at spring stock from last year, we had a lot of help from Tom Abraham, who, Zach, keep me honest, he has a radio show. I can't remember, what is it, 97.5?
Yeah, 97.7.
97.7 ESPN.
Yeah,
so he
Tennessee
helped
Valley.
us. Yeah, he helped us with speakers and a couple things. But I'd say for the most part, as far as bookings, getting the venues booked, which there's a whole story about that.
Yeah.
3 days before spring start, we were supposed to be in the parking lot. Then rain was coming. We found the venue, and then the rain didn't come. But hey, you know what? It was nice to be indoors.
I wandered around the parking lot, that stadium, looking for you guys. I had no idea where you were. I wandered around. I was like, I guess they called it off because of the rain. I don't know. And I went back to the hotel. I couldn't find. Then I found out you did it. You did spring stock, and I can't believe I missed it.
No, it's all good. But we had you for summer stock, which, as you saw, we just kind of roll with the punches. We had so that one, thanks to the Zach, again, all the deets on this. The tailgate guys, they kind of hooked us up with the tents. The guys that came up from Birmingham.
Yeah.
Oh, those guys were pretty wild.
Yeah, the Thoroughbreds tailgate group, which they've been, I would say they're probably the most diehard Stallions fans out there. Probably in the same likes as like the Shark Dog crew, those two guys on the broadcast, or any others you see. But they have it's a dedicated like club of just tailgaters that they have a private lot on this north end of the stadium that they do a massive party, and they came out for spring stock. This was nice, as you see, or for summer stock, you see the guys, not all of them traveled up, it is a haul to get up to Canton from Birmingham, Alabama, but
yeah,
nonetheless, like, they brought everything fully loaded. My guy Ray, and Stefan still prays it to this day, and I get it. The steaks he brought, those freaking I think it was New York ribeye, like ribeye, freaking impeccable. Whatever marinade he put down, like, I just cannot praise it enough. Dude knows his grill.
Yeah, we met those guys. Didn't they end up on the field somehow or other, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, they were given special access. Again, that was just from, hey, look, the league loves its diehard fans. That is one thing for certain. And I mean, Ray and company, they have a great relationship with the league. That's only going to probably keep going up. That's been only keep going up ever since the off seasons hit. But yeah, they got like priority access to get things on the pregame warm-ups. They were basically one of the closest rows down on the field to kind of get all the action. I mean, they got a basically full-on package.
Yeah, they had like the red carpet rolled out for those guys, which was pretty interesting to see. But it's kind of, like you said, cool reward for the diehards.
Oh, of course. I mean, well, you got look. I think that, for Birmingham, they did a great. Like I said, we've all said this. They did a great job hosting last year. And there were some folks that really, I think, embraced the team as well. And that's with marketing that even some people thought could have been even more in grassroots and more ingrained, and they came out really well. So this year, with us knowing they're going to even get more down and dirty with trying to talk to people, they've already been doing that. With ticket sales going to be increasing coming up. So, you got to, reward your fans that stuck through that first season very much so. And so those guys in particular are prime example of it, every week coming on out, every week showing out. And they love that team, and a lot of them are that's the thing. They carried that over from the Birmingham Iron days. They just were like, look, we got another chance for a football team. We're not going to let this one slip by again. We're going to come out and make sure we're re-supporting pro football in this city that is known for all the opportunities it's gotten in pro football.
And every time it's gotten an opportunity, the people of Birmingham have turned out for that team. It doesn't matter if it was the Americans or the Vulcans of the old WFL, if it was the original Stallions from 83 to 85, the fans turned out. And again, like you mentioned, the Iron, there was the Birmingham, the name escapes me, of the original XFL. There was the Birmingham team.
Yeah, Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts. I was picturing the lightning bolt.
I could only remember the name that they had to change, and I didn't want to bring it up.
Well, yeah, that Yeah, that's still a weird story from 01's version. So, seriously.
I don't remember that story.
Okay, so you know what?
Yeah,
just for good measure here.
Why not?
They were originally going to call it the Birmingham Blast, which, if you get into the history of Birmingham, probably not the best choice of words you could use. And
sure,
they quickly learned, let's maybe just change it to Thunderbolts. That's what we meant, guys. Thunderbolts or whatever. Was it Thunderbolts? I don't even remember.
Yeah,
the Bolts.
It's Thunderbolts.
Yeah. Birmingham Bolts.
Or Bolts, that's what they call them. The thing I remember from that rumor, it's kind of weird because if you look at the old, I weird tangent we're going on, but I just might as well add to the story.
Sure.
The whole rumor was that they had put the helmets and things together, and they had to make a last minute change. Of course, like Stefan said, to that Thunderbolts naming. The original helmet logo is lightning bolts coming from the front end, skewing out in spikes. That people think were supposed to be an explosion on the front of their helmet. So that's also that's also part of the last minute changes that they had to do to make that work.
That's interesting. I had no idea about that.
Take that home with you today. Anyone listening in, now you know.
A bet.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be on a trivia somewhere.
Right. So let's talk about the USFL. I know this is a big weekend with the XFL having just concluded, and we could talk about that in a little bit, but let's talk about the USFL. They just had their draft yesterday. You guys did a very extensive job in covering it, of which I probably only saw a fraction of, but you were really well prepared. What are your overall impressions of the whole concept, first of all, right? Because we know this wasn't a straight up draft. 10 guys aren't strolling into camp next month. So let me hear what you guys think about the way it was laid out and the way that it was executed.
It's an interesting take because, clearly if you look at last year, the inaugural USFL season, the inaugural USFL draft, you're having to fill every team, right? None of the teams have players.
Right.
Going to this year, they might, they're doing a lot of free agent signings, but their draft it probably wouldn't have brought that much attention. Where if you change it to where the approach they have now, where it makes them look like they're forward thinking, whether that'll end up happening in execution or not, I would bet one of these guys over the next 5 years that doesn't sign this year will end up in the USFL. And the coach that drafted him will look like a genius because he'll automatically get the rights to him. Now it's up to him if he wants to keep it, sign him to the team, or relinquish it and allow him to go into free agency with the league. But, I think there's an interesting take here. What I thought was probably more fascinating was during the draft on social media, it seemed like there was key players that the league was focusing on, sharing videos of, which I don't know if that means, hey, maybe we're an extra step. We feel like there's a good chance they're going to come into this league soon, or maybe in the near future. That I thought was intriguing. Zach, I don't know. What are your thoughts too, as well, on this? I know I just take over.
Oh no, I think look, this is first off, big big podcast note here. Better to not stumble over a bunch of people and have to go, sorry, you go ahead. And so him doing this order right away helps me a ton because I can just prepare on my end for the response. But my thing with this draft, I think going in, it's similar deal like Stefan's mentioning. This isn't like last year. We're not expecting like, okay, draft pick, yeah, sure, there's gonna be rights, but realistically, these are signing on players. These are like 10, it was like 8 expansion drafts if you think about it in terms of professional sports. This case, this is it's a legitimate draft. So at that point, we're looking, okay, well, football landscape. Yeah, a lot of these guys are true college grads coming on out. A lot of these guys are going to be waiting to see if their NFL opportunity is here. So your thing, and I think the biggest challenge for us to handle when doing this is, first off, we don't have the whole player pool, so we got to react on the fly to one of 3,000 players, and then counting down, less so the roughly 3% that get picked up. But then, you got to have an analysis of, okay, how realistic is this person possibly going to go to this team and how quickly or not? So, like, for example, I'll go with your squad here, Angelo. I mean, Adrian Martinez. I'll be honest with you. I think that was a great pick in terms of saying for a guy that, all right, maybe next year down the line, or for some reason, if DeAndre Johnson again gets injured again and he's available mid-season, that's who I see as someone that I think realistically could come to the league if he wants. Otherwise, though, wouldn't be shocked if he takes a UDFA designation and goes to the NFL. That's the type of stuff we have to decide. Like, for example, the Breakers, to me, they picked up Tyler Scott, and that name instantly stuck out when they picked him up first round. I'm like, okay, let me check again. Oh yeah, it's the dude that runs a 4.29 40. And I instantly stopped and I went, guys, I'm sorry, but this man's going to be in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's a great pick, but I will be surprised if that man makes it to the Breakers to play for John DeFilippo. Same for like their pickup, Dante Stills. Dude is a first team all Big 12. That's NFL talent that's going to get a look first. So like that's the challenge you play, is you're trying to kind of gauge like, okay, how realistic could this guy get here as soon as possible? Or is this like, you're just taking a stab at it because, hey, who knows? Maybe it's right on that fringe. Maybe I get lucky, but that was the strategy some of these teams played. The Stars, they played it where it's like lineman. We're thinking this, we got all these skill players. I bet we could get some of these guys back later years, but we want to build a core of something down the line that's like the big boys, the important pieces in spring football. The stuff that every team, I think, kind of hoards like like their gems close to their
gold.
vest.
Right.
Yes. Good linemen are so damn important, even more so in spring leagues than they are in the NFL. It's insane. Look at the XFL, which we'll talk in a second. Same deal. Gotta get good guys gelling right away. Otherwise, you are screwed. Philadelphia got lucky last year because they had great QB and great receiving talent to help supplement some of the pressure. But, still, I digress.
Well, you guys both make excellent points. And, some of these guys are going to sign. Not a lot, right? I think most of them harbor the NFL dream, and they're going to go through the draft, unsigned free agent, practice squad camp process, which takes us all the way through July and August, right? So for those guys that make it through that process, whether they make the last cut or not, it kind of takes them automatically out of the equation for 2023. So right there alone, whatever percentage of those guys that last deep into the process, they're all already out of the picture to some point, but makes them available possibly for next year. And that's why I kind of felt like it was, for me, actually a little difficult to get into the draft as much because of the fact that it's not in the traditional sense, restocking immediately, filling immediate needs. And I think that's where my drive to follow it closer kind of waned, where it wasn't something that, like the Generals drafted a punter from Rutgers, Corsack, who is probably going to get drafted and definitely be in camps because he's, the top punter in the country. He was the Ray Guy Award winner and all of that. But like to your point, Zach, they're playing the long game on that, where if he doesn't pan out, he can play for the New Jersey Generals, who by that point might even be in market. So I saw where the long game was there, and I saw the long game in their long snapper, Vecchio, who is a New Jersey product. He's from Cedar Grove, New Jersey. He went to high school in the state. So they're kind of setting up this possibility for a couple of years down the line, maybe, hey, New Jersey, come see your homegrown boys play here.
So you saw Mike Nolan and Kozar's draft strategy, a ton of dudes from Michigan schools. EMU got a ton of representation, by the way, in the draft. And I think, like, for example, to me, one of the likelier guys I could actually see going that got picked up is Connor Oakes at tight end. That's someone I think actually has a legit chance if he wanted to say he doesn't think his draft status is possible in the NFL. I could totally see him joining by mid-season in the USFL, because it's just that level. Don't doubt Maction, man. I love Maction guys. Got plenty of them represented between EMU and Akron. Between those two schools, got a few picks in. This feels good. Wish some Ball State guys win.
Zach loves his Maction. If you don't know, this is one thing.
Conference is so undervalued in college football, and it gets a specific part of the year every year where it gets to play Tuesday, Thursday night games. That's some special stuff. You get some good games. It's chaos on those evening ones midweek.
Ever since ESPN and the cable networks gave those midweek slots to the MAC, it certainly has opened people's eyes to the kind of talent that exists on that level, where previously it would have maybe been dismissed. And now they're in our living rooms every week, these guys, and it's impossible to ignore, for sure.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
One of the challenges I think with the draft that was, reiterating this, I think the league tried to make a really hard point to not only us, but to also just everyone else, is that, remember, this is rights first. So,
right.
And I think we try the best equation. I'll use this from when we got on the broadcast is, if you're a CFL fan, you'll understand completely what this is. Again, not every CFL American pickup gets picked up by the Canadian Football League. There's Canadian guys that do, but there are some American picks that are stretch picks. That's some of the stuff you see with the USFL. It's just, you're picking mainly from an American base that you have here. And I think that's what their biggest challenge was, getting that across to making sure, like, hey, this still matters. And I think the other key is why this matters. It's not just, sure, some could say it's for show, but it does get people talking about the league. That's something
that yesterday all
that
day.
Is something. You're right. I mean, you see schools posting about it, like even Michigan State getting on the action, like, look at this number one over a pick, Jared Horst to the Panthers. Like, that's freaking sweet. But sure, maybe you take your NFL shots if you dig deeper, but to like the average person, the public's opinion. Remember, we're diehard fans.
Right.
There's a big skew of general audience members that are trying to gather and root through this stuff. That's cool to them. We're like, oh, wow, I know these guys. They're doing a college draft. Wow, that's unheard of. I'm so used to just seeing them pick up a bunch of free agents and throw these teams together in one year. That's part of the year two magic right there. Right. That's an addition that year two rewards you, as you get to talk about that element, even if it's just for rights, which all drafts are, but even if it's just for rights, that maybe you get a chance to talk to these guys. That social experience helps.
It's kind of taking it back to when the NFL was starting to draft guys that were in the USFL, even though the USFL was still going on, just to have their rights. So then when the league folded, players ended up automatically being bound to report to certain camps, whomever it was that grabbed a hold of them. And then that paid off for certain teams, like the Redskins and Ricky Sanders, for example. That's just one. So
Bill,
yeah, there's so many, right?
Of course.
But the long game here is interesting because these guys will mostly all harbor the NFL dream first. That got drafted, of the 80 guys. Maybe for some it's not realistic, but they're all going to give it that first shot. And you know how it is too, right? They don't all advance all the way till the end of camp. There's stages, right? There's rookie camp first, and then they don't make it out of, some guys don't make it out of that. And then there's the June camp, and some guys then don't make it out of that. And then you get to July, and then there's the stage of cuts. And by then the USFL season's over. But you do have at least a few weeks where guys can start becoming available week, like you said, Zach, week 5, week 6, week 7. You just wonder, well, I mean, it's not like it didn't happen last year, but you wonder how guys like a quarterback might fit into a scheme when they come off the street. But I mean, we saw it plenty of times last year too, with teams rotating guys. So why not?
It's possible.
Well, and just looking at the long term, the one example I've been using is Paxton Lynch, right? And speaking of the XFL, there's been a lot of conversation about Paxton Lynch, but he's kind of he's had a spot everywhere.
Right.
Had the USFL been around 5 years ago, the Generals picked Paxton Lynch. You unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your thought, would be, you would be getting Paxton Lynch, because that's where he'd be reporting, unless you wanted to relinquish those rights. And I think that, to me, that's kind of cool. It'll be fun to see it happen in execution, because the one thing that I think we all agree on, maybe not everyone on the internet, maybe not everybody watching this, but I truly believe the USFL is going to be around 5-10 years from now. Just, you can say what you want about the hubs, but you know what it meant? Green, not red. Season 2, not expansion, but expansion into new markets, if you will.
There you go.
So
growth.
Sign me up. You know how many years I've been covering this stuff for? 5 years, a little bit longer now. I've covered more leagues than the years I've been covering it, and this is the first time. Not even that we got to a season 2, that we got to a championship, other than the spring league, if you count that, which I was at the Mega Bowl. One of like 5.
I think that's a little nod. You can say, oh yeah, I was there. The experimental, I would say, prototype phase of the league. I was on the ground floor.
There's a lot of people that still don't quite get the point of the hubs, even now that they've expanded into 4. There's so many posts where I'll see something like, wait. So they're calling the team Philadelphia, but they don't play in Philly. And then, exclamation, negative comment. Meanwhile, those of us that are the diehards, like you described, and that have been dialed in from the get-go, totally understand what's going on. And we're completely on board with it because it makes sense. And here we are at 4 cities, where last year it was just in Birmingham. And I'm sure next year there's going to be another hub or 2, maybe, or maybe it's all 8 cities finally.
I mean,
who knows?
And that's the thing, I think Daryl Johnston has been a great PR and voice for the league in terms of saying, like, we're laying this out. This is how this is. And it's clear and concise messaging saying, if we get to the financial stability we want and we can do it, we're going to do it. And that's, they want to make sure that they are lasting. It's about longevity. And something with the average fan, I will say, the casual audience member, is that a lot of these guys, a lot of people want to see the stuff that makes it closer to what an NFL feel is.
Correct.
So I get it. Like, look, I'm not a moron. I would love to be, for example, I'm glad they're going to Detroit for the Panthers, because last year I would have loved to have been in Detroit. But I've seen, as a spring football fan, and Stefan, of course, all of us can attest to this. We've all watched this thing. Financials matter at the end of the day. They're not the thing that's right in your face when you're a fan. You're more like, oh, thank God this is on TV. Let's just flip this on. I mean, some people could just go a whole week without caring about the behind the scenes business news that comes up on the internet. And more cares about seeing their team play on television on like Fox or ABC or wherever the hell you are. And that's what I more and more think it's what we've seen over the years, is like you can explain the hubs, but there's going to be those people going, well, if it's not in the city, then it doesn't matter. Like,
why would I care? No one from New Jersey is going to go to Canton for a game.
Right.
Yes, I am.
Right. Well, yes.
Right, yeah.
Look, like I look at those people and go, I see you're looking at the short-term vision of this, and I get it. Okay. Like your example, you're a Philadelphia fan. We'll use the Stars as a reference because we've been talking, you're a guy, you go and want to watch the Eagles play in town. I get that. You see those options for stadiums, you see university options, you're going, why aren't they out there? It's like, well, rent costs money. And
and 8 rents cost more money.
And not to mention that businesses generally don't like to have too many years that they're in the red. And if you notice the history of this sport, most of the time, the way this works, and they've tried it year after year, is that they get all the cities, they do all the travel, they say, we're going to take a loss, but eventually we'll hit that green. And I'd say that after the last 3 years, in my opinion, this is me, I don't care if this is out there, I've said this to people in the past, it gets harder for me to get behind that system when I hear, don't worry, guys, we'll lose money in a few years, but we'll hit profitability. And I go, okay, as long as you're okay to lose, as long as you're a very patient multi-million, more like multi-billionaire that has nothing to lose, then cool. So the reason I like this system is that they look at the expenditures, they run it like an actual business that wants to turn dollars. Fox does, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They could also do this whole burn through cash method if they wanted, but do they want to? Not really. That's not how Fox operates. And that's why I'm kind of like, I justify it, because as a spring guy, I'm like, more seasons means I get to watch more football, and they want to make sure that they are finding ways that make sense to a business model. So that's where I'm at. It's harder to justify to a casual guy because they just want to watch football. That's all they care. So
that's true.
But what's hilarious, I will end it on this now before either of you add on. And I bring it up because there's like skews of how the hubs are viewed between the leagues. Like the XFL, there's promos for it's our secret sauce. I'm like, well, yeah, it's the USFLs as well, but apparently, because we use extra travel and fly out to cities, that's why the secret sauce is there. I'm just like, we did the same. Like the league did the same thing last year. It's just that people don't like that they played everything in Birmingham.
Well,
yeah, it didn't compute with people, and they couldn't see past to the places that like guys like the three of us might be able to understand and get behind the idea. Because as much as I wanted the Generals in New Jersey, I wanted a season 2 more.
Right.
So I'm glad there's a season 2. Would I have liked them to be in Philly instead of Canton, maybe for the hub? Sure, because for selfish reasons, I would have been there every week.
Keep adding onto the business model. Remember, they're trying to, and this
next
is for
year.
This is for both these leagues. You're getting that you want next year, the 3-year plan initially, but they're also trying to get investor dollars. Like that still is the thing that they're working on, is getting, I think it's like 250 million is they're trying to raise in capital. And stacking seasons helps to a businessman. If you're showing dollar signs, say, hey, look, we are making money. We're doing this slow build. Your money would help fund to possibly build that up even more. Like that's what this also plays into as well. So you got to take that as a part. It's hard to think in the business angle because people don't want to talk about that, but you have to talk about it.
But that's the whole thing, right? This is all put out there for the green, not just to have games on. So a lot of people don't understand that aspect of the game, and it's up to us to kind of clear the air for people, right? Periodically.
Right.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Ref, what do you want to add to that? Anything?
Well, it's funny with the hub situation too, because you kind of dabbled on the difference between the XFL, the USFL, but I'll stay away from that piece. But I'll say this, just based on, Bruno Reagan talked about it openly on his radio show. That was the greatest season of football he ever played because he didn't have to get on an airplane. He didn't have to get on a bus. He just got up from his hotel, went down, practiced, went to training, did all of his things, didn't have to do any of that. And, there's something to be said about that too, I think. I mean, I would almost love to see a case study and see maybe even the differences in injuries, right? Maybe there might be something to that, 20, 30 years from now, it might, you call me crazy, but that we might end up doing things. This might become more of the norm just with whatever happens with the world. We'll leave it at that,
Yeah.
But either way.
That is a good point. Zach, when you were speaking earlier about the Birmingham fans, specifically the crew that was in Canton for the championship, I was thinking about the hub situation and thinking about how those fans were really the ones that kind of led the charge to get people coming back every week. And the fans of Birmingham came out pretty solid, I thought, for their team all 10 weeks. My feeling is now that there's only going to be 5 opportunities to see them instead of 10. I think that attendance for those weeks has an opportunity to spike up considerably from the, maybe 15K or so they were averaging, for the Birmingham games. What do you guys think about that? And then what about the rest of the attendance at the hubs?
I'm very much in the same light that it should help because it does space out the schedule. That's something that I think people are noticing, and the conversation kept getting a little more louder on that with like some of us on our Discords or on Twitter. It's just like, it's kind of hard to field like 10 audiences in a row at a stadium. Remember, even with $10 tickets, like economics and like time for people is still a thing you have to worry about. So like getting a spaced out schedule is important for families and, people that want to do this if they want to find the time to go to games to do so, so
right.
Nonetheless, I mean, $10 a ticket last year was a value. And then, $20 for a championship ticket, it's even more insane when you consider how that game turned out. But right. I mean, I think for the hub model, it did what it was needed for sure. This year, it's obviously they're doing season tickets. Prices will probably be expected to rise, but not crazy. I have full faith from what has been hinted, not going too far into it, that things will be pretty reasonable for people to go out there for 5 games. And, they're doing season ticket like bonuses and all that for people that they're trying to get like a legitimate fan base type of experience that they're building for these cities that have their teams in it. But it should help with overall sales, in my opinion. I think what's great for example, the schedule. I imagine Stallions fans from last year will remember week 1's game and go, oh, we're playing the Generals again, week 1 in Birmingham. Oh, that'll be fun. Like, I hope that game, I would love if that game turns out just like last year, where they pack it so much in the lower bowl that they go, oh crap, we have to open the upper bowl because we had that much overflow in that first game again. That's exciting to me. They're doing legitimate ticketing and legitimate efforts in that this year. I think even more so than they were last year, and trying to say, hey, come on out and support your team. Now they got legitimate cities that they have to go to. At least 3 of them, and then you get the Pittsburgh Metro and Cleveland Metros trying to coordinate those to get the Hall of Fame.
Right. Yeah. And I think there could be, everybody makes a big deal about, the Maulers and the Generals are playing in Canton. One, I think Canton's a perfect size stadium. Yeah, it's probably not going to perform as well as Detroit or the other 2 Southern hubs.
Agreed.
But we're really only talking about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Pittsburgh to Canton, Ohio. And I'll tell you a story. I just went to the Roughnecks game over the weekend. I live in Houston Metro. An hour and 40 minutes for me to get to the stadium, which would be the same for NRG. I live in the metro area. Yeah. Okay. You can make it's 2 different states, but we're talking the same distance here. Yeah. I think if the Maulers show up, fans will show up as well. And you can see them. The Horton family is reorchestrating that team. And anybody who thinks the Maulers are going to be the same team that they were last year, I think they're mistaken. Now, will they go 10-0? We'll have to see there. Birmingham, I think they're going to show up, and I think they're going to show up bigger. There's a couple things here that have happened. One, they're a championship team, right? Correct. They're starting out with a good base. I think the diehards that came last year, I don't think there's any that are dropping off.
They're not going anywhere.
Right? Whereas there's more people that have learned or watched it on TV, or their friends have been telling them all summer about Shark Dog or Jamar, you got to watch this game. They're going to get some people out there. And I think both of you brought it up. Going from 10 to 5 games, I think it's going to help, because now
increased demand.
Exactly right. And you don't have to carve out 10 weeks of the year. Sunday, hey, that's a big day in Birmingham with church. I think Memphis is going to show up. Just looking at the social following that they have online. Canton, we talked about. Detroit, yeah, clearly it's going to be hard to fill Ford Field. They're looking at 10,000. I think they can do that. I suggest this for anybody that's watching from the league or anybody that has that connection. When I lived in Detroit, the thing that always worked for me to get me down to a game is they would give you free bus passes. And you know what? I'd go buy a $20 ticket, jump on the bus, take one trip down Woodward, end up at the game, have a couple beers, and not have to worry about anything. And if they can get stuff like that going, keep it affordable, even swing something with the children like they did in Birmingham, where a limited amount of children free or maybe lower cost, I think you can create a good atmosphere there, especially, and Zach, I brought it up a million times. If they can go into that mid-season stretch with a winning record, right? Hey, man, tell me there ain't dudes in Detroit begging for a winning football team. I'm one of them, and I'm not even in Detroit anymore. And I'm going to be at that game. I'm going out there,
Are you going out there for the 30th?
Oh, yeah, Motor City Meetup,
Motor City Meetup.
Yeah.
All right.
It'll be good. If you're out there, join us. We're not doing a whole show, but we're doing a tailgate, and Grandma Kyleman's going to be there. That's our biggest guest.
He's hyping up. She's been thrilled about this ever since she heard about them coming to Detroit. She's like, let me know. I'm like, yeah, trust me, Grandma. I'm gonna let you know, like within the first hour of the info dropping.
That's awesome.
She's been ready, man. Between that, I got an aunt and uncle up there, and their three kids are, my cousins, and they're like, hey, we love your passion. You understand your passion for the league. You ever need to crash? House is always open. Just might be messy if it's last minute. And I'm like, you guys rock.
That's solid.
You guys a ton for that. So
I don't know that I want to make it to Detroit this year. It's a little far from Jersey. Canton is definitely in the works for at least a couple of visits, not counting the playoffs and championship. Those are like a given, right? And And outside of that, maybe Memphis, like that might be the one, just because it's a cool city too. I've been there once or twice, and that would be a fun spot to catch a game, maybe when the Generals are there. But how do you think they'll do when the non-in-market game is being played? Some of them are set up as like kind of double headers, but others are like noon and 8 o'clock. So there's time in between. I feel like we're setting ourselves up for Birmingham-esque attendance for those out-of-market games, so to speak.
I do wonder about a few of them, and I labeled a few of them. We did the schedule breakdown. There were some games that I specifically labeled for the fact, like, let's see how the audience comes out for a neutral site. So, for example, I think it's I'll pull the schedule up to re-reference, but there's a matchup between the Showboats coming to town to play the Breakers later in the season in Birmingham. Again, it's only like an hour. It's only like a few hours drive at tops to get to Birmingham from Memphis, Tennessee.
Right.
So you get that passionate fan base, you get enough roadies coming out. New Orleans Breakers fans, which honestly, I know they didn't this year, but the amount of Breakers fans and merch that gets bought, that's a team that year 3 is the first one that's going to be looked at for stadium options. Like, I want to see how many of those guys come out for those games, because that could make for a solid game in terms of reference for a neutral site. Canton is one, I think it's the big litmus test because it's middle ground of two markets. Pittsburgh Metro is technically, it's on the very fringe of it, if I were to put it there, but it's also got the Cleveland Metro fringe. So you got that hour and a half between each. And as you have said, tri-state area, it's a drive across Pennsylvania, but it still is reasonable enough to get out there, that for Stars fans as well, I think. And we saw plenty of Stars fans at the championship. That was what's crazy.
There was quite a few Philadelphia people out there.
I know that they were championship bound, but I was shocked at how many red t-shirts and ball caps I saw in the stands mixed in with the Stallions fans. That was what surprised me the most.
Even at the playoffs the week before, when it was just Stars and Generals, there was more Stars fans and Generals fans, I think, in the stands that day.
So those games will give me hope. And remember, week 2, now I know this one in week 2 because we've talked about this. So they aren't playing in Ford Field for the Panthers Stars week 2 matchup.
They're in Canton, right? The Stars and the Panthers are in. It's too bad that first game is not happening in Detroit.
Yeah, well, Luke Combs is he gets the priority access, as we will see with that.
Sure. He'll have a bigger crowd.
Yeah, well,
100%. Yeah. You can't blame Ford Field on that.
How dare you? Are you going to let us lose? You're going to let us get this country act over football, and they'll be like,
"Oh my goodness,
that's probably right."
Let's switch gears off the USFL for a second, you guys. XFL debuted this last week. There's been obviously that whole back and forth between the two fan bases. I don't understand it, but it exists, and it's sort of rivalry. I'm the guy who says the more jobs for players, the better. Let's roll. Even if I can't dedicate the same time to the XFL that I do to the USFL, I certainly hope that they put out a good product and it survives. I only saw a little bit. Enough to see Luis Perez throw a pick 6 to his former teammate, Devontae Bosby. Beyond a little bit of that game, I didn't see much strictly because of my time constraints, but you guys, I know, were a little more into it. Tell me what your perceptions was. Maybe compare their week 1 to the USFL's week 1 of last year. What do you think?
It was fun because, again, I like football. I'll tell you this, and I think I think we had an interaction online. Was it as fun as week 1 of the USFL? And not to me. I mean, there was such an energy last year with the USFL. Maybe it's because we were doing spring stock and there was all this anticipation of everybody coming like from all over the country and this and that. But I was at the Roughnecks game over the weekend. We had fun. We won. Hey, that's what we do. Can't help ourselves. But the one thing I was surprised that I heard from a lot of people were, I'm excited. I'm happy to be here, but I don't know yet. And I was actually surprised to hear that, because if you, on the internet, it's like, we all know it's a completely different attitude. The XFL, oh, we're the best, we're this and that, blah, blah, blah.
Very hardcore.
A little bit too serious. I just want to watch football. I just want to have fun, So, I think they'll do fine. I worry about the financials because, again, they're going to all markets. Yeah, they could talk about the hub, but I don't know if the hub solves much, because you're still
flying.
You're still flying across the country. To me, it almost probably makes sense to have those guys be in their markets and stay with their stadiums. I don't know. The ratings, I mean, they weren't bad, but realistically, I put context in everything. I work in marketing. Angelo, I think you work in marketing too, right? It's all about context. It's all about doing comparisons, A/B testing, all that.
And I did that as well.
Right. And so I look at the ratings and not even comparing them to the USFL. Let's just XFL to old XFL.
Sure.
Good. Hey, if the XFL 2020 wasn't around, I look at these ratings and say, man, you guys knocked it out of the park. When I compare it to the 2020 version, I'm like, okay, well, we've definitely lost some of our crowd, so we have to kind of build some of that back. Same thing with the Roughnecks. Good crowd. We bowled in 12,000 people. But then I compare that to week 1, 2020. It was 24,000. So we went half. So a good crowd, but we've already lost half of our people. Can they get it? Here's the thing. If they can get those people back, they're here for the long haul, because then investors are going to come in and they know they have a solid base that maybe they need a little convincing. Now, if they can't, if this stays steady or drops, that's where I start getting a little worried, because unlike the USFL, they're spending a lot of money. I mean, the Renegades coaching staff, that in itself, Zach, we've talked about it. It's mind blowing, because
the amount of coordinators that are on that roster. I mean, co-defensive and offensive, that it's something to have one set, but to have two sets, that's what got me. And two of those are coaching candidates that were on former spring leagues. Tim Lewis on the AAF's ironed himself. And then, of course, having Jonathan Hayes being a coordinator as well. That's what was crazy to me. You know, the main roster sticking out is Stoops having so many people, you know, on there.
That is surprising.
Staff.
That is surprising when you consider how lean the USFL went with their coaching staffs last year, where coordinators were pulling double duty and being also the line coach or the D-backs coach or whatever position that they specialized in. So that is interesting to hear coordinators on both sides of the ball. And but how about the games themselves, you guys? You know, talking about the attendance, traditionally in the first week of a new league, that's when they get their biggest crowd. And then the history has shown like the tail off starts to happen as people either lose interest or the nicer weather comes or whatever it is. Now their goal is to build upon a lower starting point than 2020. So your description of people's hesitance, I'm not sure yet, makes me feel like they got a shot just by hanging around and putting on good games to grow their in-house audiences as well as their ratings. What do you guys think?
I think so. Well, a couple things. First, St. Louis hasn't played at home yet. That place is gonna be rocking. And honestly, I would love to be out there. I just know it isn't in the cards. That one, you know, it's going to be a crazy atmosphere. And I sure as hell hope for the league and the team they put on a good game, because that's the last thing you want to do is go have a 3-3 stinker that goes, you know what I mean? Or something like that.
Now that's not this week, right? That's
no. I will be out there. That's in week 4. So,
oh man. So St. Louis doesn't get their first game till week 4.
Yeah. They had to hold off. I mean, most of the seats are already sold for that game. According to Ticketmaster, I know Ticketmaster's not, as we have learned, Ticketmaster does not accurately depict what is actually available, but I almost guarantee all the inventory is available for Lower Bowl in St. Louis, and they're going to sell easily 25K. And I can also confirm 2020 as that place rocks. The atmosphere there, those fans, they love that team so damn much. And it is ingrained in that city that when they came back.
Amazing.
So a slam dunk. Like it was impossible for the league to restart without having to put the Battlehawks back in. And I think for them, you know, I think if every team in the XFL, it's a slow grind, but I think every spring league wishes that they had a Battlehawks in every market, you know, or even like how they did with the Brahmas week 1. You know, I think that's what they hope for.
Yeah, that was not bad in San Antonio, right? Their crowd was
yeah, they had 24K. I'll give them credit. And that I am watching out for that, because they did a lot of sales to get that 24K up. They did buy one, get one free tickets, which in the realm of pro sports is insane.
As a season ticket holder, I am a little peeved about that. I'm not going to lie, because, you know, that's half. Come on, guys. You're telling me I could have waited and just gotten half off, because those seats would have been there. But anyway,
nonetheless, though, I mean, that the crowd atmosphere is what I say. I think it's nice. I will. I will admit that people, they, as we've seen, they want it. I think COVID did a lot to influence, of course, even more so towards the issues with not having crowd noise, and having that in there is really great. Having 24,000 fans and screaming out is awesome. So I think that you want to keep building that up is all you can do. It's right now, it is the main, besides merchandise sales, your revenue source is getting folks in seats. Because unless you're like, I think Fox, where you're getting money directly from your ad sales of your inventory, you're not making money on any of that I'm aware of. And there's nothing that's been said. I know not all details have been disclosed about the deal, but I would almost guarantee
when there's no
they're not
number,
making money on those ads.
I
I'm
question
sorry.
when there's no number.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. If it was a good thing, we would hear all about it.
Correct.
100%.
Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I'll admit, you talked about the beef. I didn't do myself any favors talking about the business plan, but that's just me laying it out there.
Yeah.
I'll be frank with you. My impression of the week of the football last week, it is status quo, I thought, for what spring football is. That is the best I can give you, which is not a bad recommendation. That is what you expect. QB play, some flashes, but overall does need some more gel because it was roughly a month of training camp for a bunch of new guys out there. Defense was winning games for you. We saw 2 games decided mainly by defensive scores out of the 4. I mean, the Renegades didn't even score a touchdown. They basically picked off your guy Luis Perez twice.
2 times.
And which is crazy because Perez, for all accounts, he threw for 3 touchdowns.
He threw 1 pick all last season.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so weird to say that. He had such a great TD-INT ratio. But yeah, he threw 5 total touchdowns, all 5 of the touchdowns for the game on week 1.
Amazing. So,
but yeah.
So they'll get better as the season wears on, right? The play will improve, the quarterbacks, the kick. How was the kicking? Did they have kicking issues in week 1 like the USFL did last year?
There were a few. I will say in the Battlehawks game, there was a 20-something yarder that got completely whiffed, and it was to like comical proportions of whiffed. But I mean, there were majority of kicks were hit, yes. And there's no chip controversy, whatever from last year, but like there were still misses. That's the thing.
Right.
Like there were still guys that missed what should have been for most kickers, like the 30-40 yard rangers that you expect to hit in a pro setting. So,
well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. They've got about 6 more weeks of the stage completely to themselves before the USFL, 7 weeks or so till the season starts. And
the only thing that sucks for them, I'll give them this, because we talk about TV ratings, and I almost hate talking about TV ratings after the last few years. It's like one of those things that I just kind of like pull my hair because I don't want to, you just don't want to talk about it. Because first off, that national media is going to put in saying, the ratings, they dropped week by week. And, like the USFL or XFL or the AAF. But, also because for them, they have a lot of games on FX between weeks 2 through 5. And I get what they were doing to avoid big sports, but that will be, in terms of a television perspective, in terms of engagement from audiences, that's something I'm watching as a football fan. I am wondering if they get through those weeds, how that looks on the other side to have continued engagement for the later half of the year.
Go ahead, Red.
I mean, all I was going to say is, you're going to have a lot of guys that saw the XFL this weekend, heard about it this weekend, and go into this next week and be flipping around. And maybe some of them are going to find it. I mean, it's not like, when we talk about like ABC or ESPN, where they're playing where the other channels they're playing their games, they're a little bit earlier in that list. FX, I don't know. Mine's like, I don't know, way down the list. You know what I mean?
Well, keep in mind too, like ABC and ESPN are both top 10 television networks. Right. Like ABC's number 3 as of 2021, ESPN's number 6. And that's as a cable network, by the way. It's it's the highest rated cable network in the US. And you got to wait through that. FX is down in like the 40s in terms of average range. It's not the lowest out of the 2 leagues. Actually, FS1 is the lowest.
FS1.
Like, but it still is down there. So you are taking a gamble when you have weeks that are mostly FX and ESPN2, which ESPN2 is about mid 30 range in the average viewership. So that's I think that to me, that's a fascinating experiment. Do you see those audiences stay patient to get to the football that's better at the end of the season, like most people expect, which it should. It will be better, without a doubt. But you got to go through a slog of, do I buy ESPN Plus? Do I have a cable package? These are questions you have to ask yourself.
Do I remember the games even on FX?
That too,
right?
Which FX it's had sports, but it's not historically a sports network. It's starting ESPN or Disney, much like how NBC's doing it, and how a lot of other cable channels are turning into. They're trying to become all-purpose television networks, not just skews. FX is known, of course, for their big serialized dramas, their comedies, giving Hulu content, but now, much like USA has been in the last few years, they're trying to get sports.
Right.
And this is their push to sports. Not common that they've done it, as we saw with the ratings, only about 188,000 even tuned in for that simulcast with ESPN. Curious to see how that goes with just solo games. We'll find out.
Well, as we saw last year with the USFL, whenever a game was on FS1 or on USA, those numbers paled in comparison to what they were drawing on Fox or on NBC, for example. So I believe you're going to see a, proportionately similar sort of hit to the audience sizes on those external channels that aren't as easily or off top of mind accessible,
right,
so to speak, right?
Nature of the beast, cable's changing, TV's changing.
It really is, and as someone who in my day-to-day profession deals with ratings and viewership numbers and all the spectrum of cable networks that an ad can go on, it doesn't make my head spin as much as it might make the normal fans head spin if they try to delve into this stuff. But to your point, Zach, how many times last year did you see people posting under a USFL thread, what channel's the game on? Where can I find the games? Where are these games being played? It seemed like no matter how deep into the season we got, there was still people that had no clue what was happening. Some don't even know the league exists. I've asked friends, did you catch the XFL over the weekend? And they're like, there was an XFL again? And so there's still a lot of people in the dark.
And that's part of the broadcast deal they have. Every week you were guaranteed at least one national televised broadcast on over-the-air television, which I cannot state enough how important that is in a modern television setting, to have one of the big four, now big five. CW, by the way, I work for Nexstar, just no disclosure. They're trying to make CW now an all-purpose network. So they're getting in
on the golf, right?
Yeah, they added Live Golf. They're adding stuff. So the access to free TV, that's big. With cable the way it's going, having those games that you can just flip on a television with like a basic $30 HD antenna for cord cutters,
right?
It's huge. It's huge to have that access. So having one a week like they did last year, at the minimum one a week, by the way, was big. And they're going to do the same thing this year. With the ABC deal with ESPN, that's the thing. That's the big deal. Can you carry it with cable? And can you get the ESPN Plus subscribers? Again, I'm not going to call jury's still out, because I don't want to be that guy through week one, because as I've told you, ratings make me pull my hair out anymore.
Yeah.
But it's something that we all are keeping an eye on, because that's the game they're playing. So,
well, it'll be very interesting. We've got 9 more weeks of their season to keep an eye on and, use as case studies for what to do or not to do. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of unique situations spring up pardon the pun, spring up during the course of,
it fits. I love a
during
good
the
pun.
course of the year, right? Hey, before we wrap it up, as the USFL heads into training camp, you guys, I know Zach, you mentioned about the Maulers being a story because of the Horton family turning things around there from an image and culture wise. But what is your heading into training camp, you guys? What's your biggest thing to keep an eye on as March 18th and 20th rolls around?
Wow. My take is the free agent signings. I mean, we started everything talking about the draft and how, a lot of these guys probably aren't going to go over there, even so much so that they're not even going against their training camp rosters. But we have Ryan Willis, which dude's a stud. I don't know what they were thinking over there in St. Louis. Zach, there's probably parts of that game they were wishing they could throw Ryan Willis in over the last weekend. I'm super excited to see him in the USFL, but the one that dropped the day that we're recording here
today,
Bethel Thompson coming from the CFL over to the USFL. I mean,
NBC.
What a move.
That's a great get.
Move. Like, that's what I'm looking at, is these QB battles that are starting to pick up, even more guys coming through, because, nothing's final until we get to that training camp. And even then, as we saw with like Bo Scarborough last year, anything can happen. And that's why I love spring football.
I'm very much a fan in that regard. I think, to me, for training camp, I'm wanting to see, are there any trades or moves for roster parity? Because I think something the USFL praised a lot last year that we saw, the one-score game, the close game. You were almost guaranteed every week to have a majority of your games go down to the wire and be worth your time getting invested in. So I almost feel like some of these rosters, for example, like we talk, the Breakers, who, as for example, they have 3 quarterbacks and 4. They have 4 in roster, of course. But I think people have talked most about 3, which are Davis Cheek, Akeel Glass, and now McKell Bethel Thompson after today, or McLeod Bethel Thompson, not McKell. But nonetheless, I think I want to see if the league, it's up to these rosters and GMs, of course, to discuss with their coaches on what they want. But I almost feel like the league says, hey, man, I mean, if you want to go talk to these other coaches, we would love to see you get a quarterback that maybe could get a start over here, add some parity, because like, QB battles are going to be a deal. Like Akeel Glass, for a while, like we were talking with the Breakers, he was expected, him and Davis Cheek were expected to be competing, and we thought that was a great QB battle to look at.
Yeah.
Now McLeod Bethel Thompson's coming.
Right.
Okay, where does that throw for a loop? Because now you have a 2-time CFL, Grey Cup winning MVP quarterback that's landing on your roster. You're going, okay, does he automatically get it? Like, what happens with Akeel Glass? Does he want to move to a team? As we've talked, Stefan and I, like, and others, I think, talk, the Gamblers are one of those teams that they keep sitting there. Like, they have Kenji Bahar and Montel Kozard. Sure, you can run with them, but hey, I bet there's a few QBs around the league, between that, I'd say the Breakers and the Showboats. You can probably pluck a QB from one of those 2 rosters and they could go start or possibly compete right away for a starting spot. That's what I'm looking for. Do you see trades for parity and for fun? That's what's got me curious, because remember, it's an entertainment property first for the USFL.
Right.
And that makes good TV to me.
Right.
I like that, the way you brought that up, creating some kind of balance with the talent, and why have one team hoard 3 really good quarterbacks when they're only going to be able to play 1, maybe the second guy. I mean, injuries happen, whatever. But for me, I'm curious to see how much continuance there is. Like, are we picking up where we left off? Are the Stallions going to start out with 5 straight wins? Are the Generals still going to be that battering ram of a running team? Is that culture going to change at all? What happens with Pittsburgh? That's what I want to know. Like, we know they're not going to be 1-9 again. We know that the Panthers are not going to be a doormat. So, assuming everybody's gotten better, somebody's gotten worse.
Wow. I don't think any of us are fully expecting, or maybe our hope, maybe not as crazy. I know 9-1 for you last year was great, but I almost feel like I don't think you see another season where there's 2 9-1 rosters again. Right. Maybe you see 1, because, for example, like the Stallions, they brought a lot of their key guys back and have basically made additions that make them look possibly scarier than last year.
Sure.
Same in Philadelphia, to me, could take a leap. But like, I almost feel like we're going to see more teams that are in that mid-range that makes it competitive till the end, like we didn't get to see in week 10 last season. That's my hope,
except for the Gamblers, because that's, we've mentioned before on our show, 12-0, baby. All
he meant the Panthers. Actually, he's not going to win week 1.
I've talked to a bunch of I'll leave you guys with this one. I've talked to a bunch of the Generals in the off season, and 2 of them have gone on record as saying that they're going to go undefeated this year. So
I love that.
I mean, I love it too, but based on our conversation right now about the improvements across the board on all these teams, how's that going to happen?
Hard. It's going to be it's going to be a lot harder. Pro football going undefeated in any league is pretty damn hard, if you ask me. I'll tell you what, though, Generals wise, if they're going to do that, they're going to make it quite fun with those 2 stars matchups. Ever since I've talked with Channing Stribling, as you know, that's just got me even more hyped for those rematches. Oh, my cat. That's great. Full disclosure, here's my room. Yay.
No curtains, literally,
You
right?
mean the Wizard of Oz isn't behind there?
Come on. We're almost to the end.
We were just about to wrap up.
Well, that really was my cat. She's right here. And
At
just
least
said,
there's not like a
"Okay."
dead body on your bed or something. You're good.
Oh yeah. I ain't that dumb. You like I'm not crazy.
Well, you guys, this was an absolute blast. I bet if we wanted to keep going, we could do this for another. I tell this to every guest. If we want to do, we can keep going for another couple of hours, right? But
Without
it's
a
going to
doubt.
be a long season. It's going to be a long training camp. Are either you guys going to check out training camp? You're going to make a drop in on any of the camps?
Zach
Give me
might. I don't know if I will, just because I'm already planning on traveling to all 4 hubs during the season.
Oh wow, all 4.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
he wants to at least hit all the games. I don't know. I might. I know that me and Jake Ball on our end, who runs Panther Shadowcast, he's definitely thrilled to go. He's ready to go to EMU. So if I can get a chance to go up there, visit family right out of the gate, then yeah, I'll definitely want to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to try my best to get to at least all 4 of the hubs this year as well. That's the goal. If I can execute it, I'm doing it. Get to at least one of each game.
Well, we already are, Zach. We got Spring Stock Day 1 in Birmingham, Spring Stock Day 2 in Memphis, the Motor
I
City
know.
Meetup in April 30th, and
cool is
Summer
that?
Stock in the championship.
This is
See,
me
you forget
covering
these
my
things.
This is me covering my in case life happens type
Oh,
of thing.
life. Oh, get over it, Zach.
Football is life.
Oh, get
Football
over
is
it.
life.
Oh, I see now. All right. That's cool.
Guys, thanks for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to our further interactions during the year. I look forward to running into you guys at one of the hubs at some point. If it's not at the playoffs, hopefully it's before that.
Likewise. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
coming on.
you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight, you know him, Zach in the Ref. I'm your host, Angelo Fioris. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at USFL Today. Make sure you follow these 2 guys as well. I don't know the Ref says, and Zach, what's yours?
Just at Zach Kyleman if you're going on Twitter. So
There you go. Make sure you
Real
follow
simple.
both of these guys because they cover the USFL as well as anybody else out there as well. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time on USFL Today.